If you're looking to build the best gaming PC for under $1,000, you've come to the right place. Because in this video, I'm going to be walking and talking you through some great components that make a $1,000 build really quite reasonable in 2022. Capable of playing all of the latest AAA titles at 1080p, high settings, 60 FPS and above, this is a build you don't want to sleep on. Let's do this. Ebuyer is your one-stop shop for great deals on technology and gaming hardware here in the UK. If you're looking to build a new PC this year or just supercharge your setup with a new monitor or some peripherals, head over to ebuyer.com and check out their wide range of great deals. What's more, they've also got some great deals on pre-built PCs from AlphaSync, awesome systems that are ready to ship. Check them out at the link in the description below. As with any of our builds, I'll be walking you through the components and putting them together as we go, before taking a more detailed look into aesthetics and performance a little bit later. First though, let's take a look at our CPU and motherboard combo, two really pivotal parts which shape up how our whole build is going to perform. You'll notice right away that I've gone for an Intel approach for this build, and some people think that recently I've been really biased against AMD. That's not the case, and I'm so excited for their Ryzen 7000 chips, which hopefully will be dropping in the coming months. But for now, the existing Ryzen lineup is just a bit old and stale. There's no upgrade paths, no support for new memory, no PCIe Gen 5 support. It just doesn't make a whole load of sense to recommend now when they've got some new special sauce dropping hopefully very soon. For this build, I've picked up the Intel Core i5-12400F. A CPU that really punches above its weight for an entry-level i5 chip and isn't going to bottleneck even like a 3060 Ti or 3070 GPU. This particular model isn't overclockable, saving you some money, although of course it does mean lower clock speeds in the long run, but it still provides great performance, with Intel's latest performance cores and some great clock speeds. I'll be going ahead and installing it into my favourite B660 motherboard, this Asus Prime D4. There's a few reasons I love this board from micro ATX more compact systems. Not only does it have 4 RAM DIMM slots, great for dual channel memory performance and upgrades later down the line, but it's got support for all the latest Intel 12th gen CPUs, PCIe Generation 4 SSDs, and a solid I/O, where you'll also find yourself with some nice fast USB ports, having to keep things a little bit future-proofed. The only thing it doesn't have is Wi-Fi, which I would recommend considering, and we've talked about the best features to look for on a motherboard in a recent article over on the website. Pull up the retention arm, take off the black plastic socket cover, and install the CPU. And once we've done that, we can move on to the RAM or the memory. This is the Corsair Vengeance RGB RS. Oh, hello, whoa. Or at least it was before I broke it. This is a really low profile budget derivative of Corsair's Vengeance RGB Pro line of memory. With a 3600 MHz clock speed, more than quick enough for what we want, and two 16GB DIMMs means we'll also get the advantages of dual channel performance in this build. I think I said two 16GB DIMMs. I meant two 8GB DIMMs for 16 gigs in total. 32 gigs would be a nice upgrade, but of course, remember, we have got a spare couple of RAM DIMM slots, allowing you to add those in later down the line if you've got a bit of cash going spare. Now, one thing we are also going to do at this stage is install the M.2 SSD, something we'll be popping under this PCIe 4.0 heat shield. One thing about the latest fast Gen 4 drives that's worth bearing in mind is heat. And it's why motherboards like this one now include heat spreaders as standard for one, if not all, of the Gen 4 NVMe slots. Don't get me wrong, these drives are fairly good at managing heat, and a low-end Gen 4 drive like this WD Black SN770 isn't likely to be outputting 80, 90, or 100 degrees. It's going to be much cooler given how fewer chips there are on the drive itself. Either way though, we're going to uninstall the heat shield, pop the drive in, and pop the heat shield back on for good measure. You can pick up drives as well that have a heatsink built in, and WD have some nice black heatsink derivatives of these drives as well, which we'll link alongside everything in the description below. Lovely stuff. There is actually one final step to go through, and that's installing our cooler. Now, this is going to be instinctively a bit of a controversial choice. I'm sticking with the in-house stock cooler. Not for any reasons other than the fact it's free, it comes included, and it actually will keep our 12400 surprisingly cool. Take a look at these temperatures we recorded from this system using this exact CPU cooler. It's going to do a great job, save us a load of money, and is easily installed by clicking in each of the corners. If it's brand new, it'll have its own thermal paste, but if it's used or you've used it before, drop a dab of your own on to ensure a nice strong thermal bond between the processor and of course the stock cooler itself. Crucially important when the heatsink is just that little bit smaller. What we then want to go ahead and do is move the completed motherboard assembly into the case. Now, a few months ago, we did a sponsored video with Colink for their Sighted Owl Glass SE, and I liked it so much I've gone ahead and bought with our own money the mesh version of the case for this build. It's a bit cheaper. I think it also will provide some slightly better airflow opportunities. It's a more simple aesthetic, but saving money on a case in a build like this gives us those valuable extra pennies to spend, of course, on our graphics card. A part which will make a materially much bigger difference than a nicer looking case. I think the best way to describe this case is a bit of a pocket rocket. You can see here that on a desk it doesn't take up too much space, it's not going to be absolutely massive, and for someone building their first PC, it doesn't really get much better. This is an absolutely ideal choice. I'm not being paid to say that, we paid for this, as I say, with our own money. It's just a great option. One thing you of course get with the glass version and the RGB version is of course some nice fancy aesthetics, but I think we'll pop in a couple of cheap RGB fans at the front a little bit later. Before that though, let's go ahead and lay the case down flat on the table and actually install the motherboard. Now for this build, we need to go ahead and check that our micro ATX board has got all the holes in all the right places. What I mean by that is we're going to install the motherboard using the standoffs that come included with the case. If we look at the chassis itself, you can see there's 2 at the top, 2 along the middle and 2 down the bottom. We just need to add 3 down the right hand side as well to make sure these match up 1 for 1. Having an extra standoff in the wrong place can be really bad, so make sure they're all exactly positioned. Once you've done that, add in your motherboard's I/O shield if applicable. That's this little stainless steel add-on that comes included with the motherboard, and then add your motherboard itself into place. Screw it down through each of the screw hole locations with the screws that come included in the bag that we just removed from the inside of the case. Nice and simple. Once this is installed, the build's starting to come together, and we can go ahead and move on to the GPU. Now, believe it or not, the GPU market's taken a bit of a topsy-turvy tumble over the last few weeks, and AMD cards are now in stock more than Nvidia cards and cheaper. Now, to be clear, most modern graphics cards from RTX 3000 and RX 6000 are in stock. All of the Nvidia and AMD range are pretty accessible to buy, but AMD has been cheaper on price. Yes, you lose out on DLSS, AMD's equivalent is not as good, and the same goes for ray tracing, but what you gain is slightly more video memory, 8GB on this card, and a much cheaper price point. Plus, for games like Fortnite, Valorant, and even Apex Legends, AMD cards tend to perform better than Nvidia cards when looking at comparable price points. And if the positives weren't quite enough yet, I've got another one for you. Coolers like this Asus Dual are actually available, wait for it, at MSRP! Hallelujah! Making a budget affordable build like this one finally possible again. It feels so good to say that. We'll be jumping into detailed performance benchmarks shortly, so don't go anywhere. But first, we actually need to go ahead and remove these top 2 PCIe covers on the back of the case. You'll also find it's got a vertical GPU mount, something I won't be using today because I think for airflow temperatures, a horizontal is better, especially at this price point where picking up a PCIe riser cable, spending extra money on more fans, it's just not really too worth it. Let's go ahead and remove this. Whoa! I got it! It's out! We're going to remove that module and then go ahead and remove the top 2 PCI lanes, a little something like so. Nice and easy. Hold on to the screws that then come loose once you remove these lanes, as we'll be using these in just a moment to pop the GPU back on and then reinstall the vertical GPU mount just to tidy the aesthetics up a little bit. What we're then going to do is push back the clip on our top slot with the nice shielding on to prevent GPU sag and that kind of thing. Slide the card into place, apply a bit of pressure, and it will click in.
fasten down with a couple of screws, and then return our lovely PCIe covers back into place. He says in theory, here we go, that goes like so, and tighten things up a little, something like so. Once that's done, we can then go ahead, spin the case back around and take a look at our nearly completed build. It's really coming together. The whole thing's well proportioned, the micro ATX form factor fills the case up without taking up loads of room, while still giving us the flexibility to install normal components like a standard ATX power supply, which handily enough is our next component. Oh, what a segue. This right here is our final component today, and Corsair's CX650F. Now, to be honest with you, any 650 watt power supply you can find at a reasonable price with a decent 80 plus certification will do the job nicely. But I like the ones from Corsair. They've proved themselves to be very reliable over the years, and include all the cables you could possibly need for a build like this one. There's just more and more, they just keep coming. Now, thankfully, there's only a few different cables we're gonna need. We definitely won't need all the ones in this pile. The first is this, a 24-pin motherboard power connection. This end goes to your PC, this end goes to your power supply. It's the same affair with our GPU power connection. This end goes to our graphics card. We don't need both, only one we can tuck the other away, and this end goes to your power supply. The CPU power connection is next up. Here you'll find yourself with a 4+4 pin connection. This end goes to the PC, and this solid end that doesn't split into two goes to the power supply. And then finally, to wrap things up, there should be one more cable in here somewhere. Found it. This is our SATA power connection. I'm not sure if we'll need one for this build because we've got no traditional SATA SSD or hard drive, but it is good for powering up fans or RGB hubs or accessories you go on to buy later. These go to your accessories or your hard drives, and this end goes to your power supply. Plug all of those up, screw the PSU into the rear of the case, and then install your motherboard power cable first of all, CPU power cable next, and your 6+2 pin GPU power too. Once the power cables are in, there's one more little step to go, and that's plugging in our I/O at the top of the case. You'll find yourself some USB 3 ports, which you'll plug in with the largest notched connection, audio ports for your headphone and mic jacks, which will go to the bottom left of the board, in a more traditional front panel style, and then of course your JFP ones, the fiddly pins that make the power, the reset, and the LEDs all work nice and easily. Pop these into the bottom right corner of your motherboard. They can be fiddly, but refer to the on-screen diagram, which will hopefully make your life just that little bit easier. Once you've done that, we're ready to boot the system up and see how it performs. But before benchmarks, we need to see how good it looks in the only way we know how. I'll see you in a second, but first, roll that montage. Now that we've seen just how good this build looks with our AMD cards sitting pretty, just how well does it perform? That's the next question that we're going to answer, and perhaps is the most important factor to consider when looking at whether or not this is a build you want to assemble. On your screen now is a summary of all the different benchmarks that we ran and all the results we achieved. I'll be taking a closer look at a select number of games that we refer to as our focus titles, and as always, full benchmark runs will be linked in the description below. Looking at COD Vanguard first up in a bit more detail, here we tested at 1080p high settings. We achieved 135 frames per second on average, with 119 and 106 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. It was a similarly positive story in Forza Horizon 5, where at 1080p Ultra, we pulled in 90 frames per second on average. 87 and 72 rounded off a solid suite of 90 and 99th percentile results, and we tested overall using the game's inbuilt benchmark mode. Moving on to a bit of Apex Legends next up, and this is a game where AMD cards genuinely typically excel. Here we got 163 frames per second on average at 1080p high, with strong 90 and 99th percentile results that indicated consistent frame rates. One of the most popular FPS titles right now, Apex performed well on this system and yielded some great results. Moving on to Valorant next up, here we tested at 1080p high and really pushed the pure rasterization performance of our beautiful 6650 XT to the limit. We got 450 frames per second on average overall, a number I was suitably impressed with consistent 90 and 99th percentile results that kept things nicely juiced along.
Next up, we also tested a bit of Fortnite 1080p competitive settings, tuning everything down to low, setting the render distance to far, and going ham. We got 225 frames per second on average, with 202 and 168 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. Finally, to really wrap things up, we tested out COD Warzone at 1080p high settings. Here we once again surpassed the 150 frames per second mark, pulling in 152 on average to be precise. 137 and 108 rounded off a nice suite of 90 and 99th percentiles, and the game looked awesome. This 6650 XT not only looks good, but performs well evidently, and really impressed me in today's gaming PC build.